Hey guys, I'm your host Tara A. Devlin, and welcome to this week's episode of Kowabana, true Japanese scary stories from around the internet. My latest book, Kowabana Volume 12, is now out. Collecting even more of your favourite stories from the show, you can find creepy ghosts, abandoned buildings, haunted shrines, fascinating monsters, and much, much more. You can find that on Amazon right now, and help support the show at the same time. This week, we're looking at some dark, terrifying encounters with the other side. First up, a group of friends decide to do a test of courage at school, but the results will be far beyond what even they expected. What really lurks on their own school grounds? Find out in Test of Courage in the Rain. The ground behind our high school always flooded when it rained. Not surprising, considering it used to be a rice field. The area was deeply countryside, with more rice fields behind the school and some houses here and there. I was in the tennis club, and I practiced on those grounds happily every day. It was the rainy season, and rain was pouring heavily this day. The grounds were soaked, and so we had to cancel our usual practice to running indoors instead. This sucks. Everyone was bored and getting fed up. Everyone honestly loved playing tennis, but we couldn't get better if we didn't train, so in the end, we cancelled practice and called it a day. The captain truly was the best. Having said that, we were all young idiots, so we didn't go home straight away. We went back to the club room and everyone started playing mahjong. I wasn't very good at it, so I lost myself in some dirty manga while thinking about the cute girls in the girls' tennis team. "Hey, let's do a test of courage," Omaru suddenly said. He was the funny guy who always came up with crazy ideas for us to try, and his nickname, meaning Potty, was pretty fitting as well. "Yeah, let's do it." Everyone on the team was an idiot, so they all agreed. "Where?" "Let's check out the girls' room next door." "That's not a test of courage, that's a test of porn." It was decided that we'd go to the rugby grounds, I forgot the name, that were behind the school, known as the rear grounds. Leave a tennis ball on each side of the goals, and then come back. There were no lights, and it was dusk during the rainy season, so it was kind of creepy. It was raining pretty hard too, not just a drizzle. "Let's invite some of the girls too. It'll make their tops see-through," Kamiyama, the idiot, said. Nah, the manager will just complain," everyone disagreed. We played rock, scissors, paper to decide the order. First was Kojima, second Aoyama, third was me, fourth was Omaru, and then fifth Kamiyama. When it was actually time to leave, everyone's faces darkened. Like, now that we were actually doing it, everyone was afraid. And so, in that dark atmosphere, Kojima screamed cheerfully, "Oh, right, I'll be back. Let's go!" The captain, second and third graders were packing up and getting ready to go home. A test of courage. You guys really are morons. "Don't lose the key, all right?" the manager said, handing Omaru the spare clubroom key. As the rain poured, the clock struck 5:30. The girls next door had already gone home. Most of the other clubs had already gone as well, other than those using the gym and the arts clubs. I could hear brass instruments coming from the main building as well. Maybe Kojima fell in the river. Maybe he's stuck to a telephone pole. You referencing Inachu again, Omaru? 15 or so minutes passed before Kojima returned. "What happened? Did you see a ghost? Did you step in crap?" "I didn't see anything," Kojima replied. "If you need some type of comment, well, the grounds really are wet in the rain." "Well, that's boring." "Agreed." "Shut up, you virgins. The next guy should go now." "You shut up. We're all virgins here, and that means you too. Once they were done with their pointless conversation, Aoyama went next. The sky was now actually dark outside. What, Kojima? It can't have been that old guy from before, right? That statement gave me chills. What do you mean, that old guy from before? I quickly asked him. I looked at my phone and it was after 6 p.m. Aoyama still hadn't returned. I thought he left around 5:55 and now it was 6:25. It should only have taken him 15 minutes to go and come back. Kojima, what's this about an old guy? Omaru asked. I don't know. I kinda spaced out, but there was someone standing in the corner of the grounds that looked just like that old guy from the fields. The air in the club room grew tense. I remember feeling like I really didn't want to go anymore. The fact that some strange old guy was standing on the school grounds in this rain was more than frightening enough. And now, after talking, it was 6:25. Maybe Aoyama's in trouble. Let's go check it out. Everyone grabbed their rackets and ran from the room. At first, everyone was laughing and joking that what Kojima saw must have been an illusion. But now it was dark and Aoyama still wasn't back. What if that old guy was some weirdo? Nah, he was standing on the school grounds in the heavy rain. He was definitely a weirdo. Aoyama was in trouble. When we left the club room, it was raining harder than I expected. Nobody said a thing. With rackets in hand, we left the semi-basement clubroom, went past the library, then down the side of the school building to the path by the archery field that led to the rear grounds. The summer solstice was near, and yet it was almost completely dark at 6:30. Were the clouds really that thick? At the time, I was honestly scared, but also excited. A single old man would be no problem for all of us to take on, honestly. But it was probably because all this had started with a test of courage and now something unknown had appeared. There was a single public path from the school leading to the rear grounds. We passed over the short hilly path from the archery grounds and then when we passed over the irrigation canal bridge, we saw Aoyama on the grounds. This irrigation canal ran around the back of the school almost like an enclosure, and it was full of fish, so it was generally pretty clean. But on this day, there was so much rain you couldn't see anything through all the mud. Aoyama seemed to be heading our way. I didn't see an old guy standing around either. Everyone was relieved. Aoyama's fine. Omaru opened the wire mesh door to the grounds and went in. The rest of us followed. Hey, Aoyama, you're late. What the hell are you doing? We screamed at him from about 150 meters away. Aoyama didn't answer, but he was walking towards us. Hey, he's acting a little strange, don't you think? The grounds were a muddy mess, and we couldn't press forward as we hoped. The rugby guys are gonna be pissed we messed up their field. It's fine. They won't know it was us. Hey, Aoyama! But then suddenly, Aoyama started screaming. He was still about 100 meters away. We all stopped and once again fear gripped us. Honestly, I wanted to run. It was the first time I'd ever heard Aoyama scream like that, and worse, I had no idea why. It wasn't like there was anyone nearby. Everyone naturally looked around and there wasn't anyone in the corner of the grounds either. There was nobody, not near Aoyama either. But still, he was crying. I honestly wanted to run away. Hey, Aoyama, what's wrong? Omaru screamed, his face turning pale as he ran. Nobody wanted to be left behind, so we all ran as fast as we could towards Aoyama as well. The rain was so heavy. It was so dark. What time was it? When we reached Aoyama, We were shocked. A hand coming out of the ground was gripping his leg. It held him there tight. So that was why he looked like he was trying to reach us but couldn't. Nobody could say a thing. "Get this thing off me!" Aoyama screamed at me, but I took a step back and just stared at it. My heart felt strange. My head hurt. My vision was blurry. A mannequin? It was a mannequin's hand. A mannequin. But why was it sticking up out of the ground like that? And even though I knew it was just a mannequin's hand, I was still scared to take it off. And Aoyama no doubt wouldn't have been so scared if this didn't happen during a test of courage as well. Not to mention how dark it was already. Standing alone in the middle of the school grounds, in the rain, with a mannequin hand gripping his leg. It was absolutely terrifying. The hand was clenched so firmly around his leg that it took us 5 minutes to finally get it off. Aoyama said that when he placed the tennis ball at the goal, he got scared and tried to run back, but something suddenly grabbed his leg. When he looked down, it was a human hand. He was no doubt in shock. He then quickly realized it was a mannequin hand, but he struggled for 10 minutes to get it off and still it wouldn't budge. He must have dashed right into it, forcing it there, and then he started to panic. "You didn't see some strange old guy?" Kojima asked. I don't know, but when I was trying to get this off, I heard footsteps coming towards me. Or maybe I was just scared. I didn't want to see anything, so I closed my eyes. I was no doubt just imagining it." After seeing us all, Aoyama started to calm down and sounded somewhat embarrassed. "Let's go home," Kojima said. We all nodded and went to leave. Nobody touched on the fact that Aoyama said he heard something. We couldn't. We were afraid. We were drenched from the rain. Why on earth was all this happening to us? We should never have done the test of courage. We took care of Aoyama as we made our way back towards the school building, when we heard it. The sound of boots sloshing through mud. Someone was right behind us. We couldn't move. We all froze. We all screamed. The grounds were about 300 meters long from one end to the other. We were right in the middle, so it was another 150 meters to the wire mesh door. At that very moment, however, it seemed so far away. How could someone suddenly appear behind us in the middle of the school grounds when nobody was there just moments ago? And that laugh was a woman's voice, not an old man's. Not to mention the weird mannequin hand sticking out of the ground. Everyone screamed. We were so afraid that we all ran around screaming. We flung the door open and ran from the grounds, but we were too scared to go back into the school, so we stood there on the path between, frozen. The rain was starting to lighten. Everyone struggled to breathe, and their faces were all pale. We turned to look towards the grounds, but of course, nobody was there. "Did you hear that?" I asked Omaru. "Yeah," he nodded. We all looked at each other. We'd all left our rackets behind. Kamiyama was the only one still holding his. If we left them in the rain, they'd become useless. We had to go back and get them. The grounds were pitch black and the only light we had was coming from the streetlights. I asked Kojima to show me his phone, and it was just before 7 p.m. "I'll go get them," I said. I was pretty proud of myself. No doubt I said that because I'd watched Armageddon just a week earlier. I borrowed Kamiyama's racket and went back. Of course, nobody was there. And if somebody was, all I had to do was hit them with the racket. It was no doubt just some old weirdo anyway. About 50 meters away, something shaggy and wet fell to the ground. It was a head. I was scared, but also relieved. I mean, considering the hand I'd just seen, I was certain this was a mannequin head too. I was starting to think the mannequin had moved, so it helped me calm down. But when I looked up, I saw someone standing in the middle of the grounds. "Who's there?" I screamed angrily. But the figure didn't move. They didn't even appear to be breathing. They didn't move. They didn't seem real. Was a mannequin standing up? The figure had no head. Our rackets surrounded the mannequin. I wanted to run. My vision narrowed. The rain stopped. There was no sound other than cars in the distance. I could vaguely see the lights of a house nearby, but right in front of me stood a mannequin. It was almost pitch black. I was too afraid to turn around, but I couldn't go forward either. Then, at that moment, I heard a voice by my ear. "Hoo-hoo." Without turning around, I swung my racket. There was a thump and someone cried. At the same time, the mannequin in front of me fell over. With a scream, I picked the rackets up and went to run back. Something grabbed me. I opened my eyes before I could stop myself. The mannequin's head was right in front of me. There was no expression on its face, but its eyes sparkled. The hair was soaking wet and muddy. I headbutted it. "Hey! Are you okay?" I heard Omaru's voice. The mannequin's head clung to my back. I ran. I didn't want to see what was clinging to me. I closed my eyes and ran. The head kept hitting my back. I ran off the grounds with a terrible cry. After leaving the grounds, I ran back towards the other guys and clung to them without saying a word. They seemed afraid of me hugging them, and they all cried as well. We decided to return to the club room via the main gate, rather than the path that passed by the archery field. Back in the club room, I took off my muddy clothes and wiped myself dry. Nobody said a word. We decided to just go straight home. The clock in the room said 7:45. We all walked to the station in silence, and then Kamiyama and I said goodbye to Aoyama, Kojima, and Omaru, who were going home in different ways. "Let's keep this a secret," Kamiyama said on the train. I had no idea what was what anymore, but I also didn't care. I got off at the nearest station and said bye to Kamiyama. The rain had completely stopped and only the roads were wet. As I walked down the dark road, I couldn't help but think about what had just happened. I wondered if that mannequin was still following me. There was no way, right? At any rate, I hurried home. I reached the front door without incident, but as I opened it, I could have sworn I heard a voice. "Hoo-hoo." Someone was behind me. When I came back to, I was in my room. It was morning. Apparently my dad found me lying by the front door. I was just passed out, no injuries, so he put me to bed. I later heard from one of the guys on the rugby team that there was this artist who lived near the school grounds and he wasn't quite right in the head. He was often seen entering the school grounds without permission and doing something strange. Apparently, he liked to break and bury dolls. When one of the rugby guys asked him why he buried them, apparently the only thing he said was, "Because they're buried." No matter how many times they asked him, that was all he would say, so they stopped asking. I didn't hear the voice again after that, and my friends and I all safely graduated. All of this happened to me 3 years ago, and I've written everything down the best I can. My memory is a little hazy, so I've just written down what I remember people saying. But who was the owner of that voice? That's still a mystery. Was it the artist? Was he angry that I hit him with my racket, so he followed me all the way home to give me a little surprise? Either way, I feel like I was subjected to an elaborate prank. Did he hide somewhere on the grounds so it looked like no one was there? How did he make the mannequin stand up? And how did he make the head stick to my back? Were we just so frightened that we weren't thinking straight? Maybe so many strange things happened all at once that made us that scared. I don't know. But the one thing I can say for sure is that when I passed out by the front door, that mannequin's black hair was there as well. Next, a family on their way home encounter something strange in the mountains that will destroy not just their family but their futures as well. Find out what in Yamame. This happened on the way home from my mother's family home. Her family home was in the countryside of Ji Prefecture, a mountainous place where people went to camp in summer and ski during winter. It was the Obon season, so the three of us got in the car and set off. It had been a while since we last went there, so my grandfather was especially happy to see us. We stayed overnight, and then the next night, as we were getting ready to leave, my grandfather looked up at the moon and said, "Keiko, why don't you stay another night? I'm worried. The roads are dark out there." My younger brother and I had plans to see our friends the following day, however, so our mother politely declined. Looking back on it now, we really should have stayed one more night. I stared out the window in the car, feeling sleepy. My mother was driving and my brother was asleep. She called out to me once in a while, and I responded absent-mindedly. We were driving through the mountains, sure, but the roads were still paved and trucks often passed, so it was wide enough for 2 lanes, even though it was only a single one. As the lights illuminated the road, we slowly took a curve and, for a moment, I saw something white. "You just saw that, right?" I asked my mother. "Stop that! You're scaring me," she replied angrily. Immediately after that, I felt something go inside me. A chill ran through me. My vision blurred like I was drunk. I couldn't speak properly, and I couldn't move. Oh no. The moment I said that, I sensed something behind me. My brother had woken up. I tried to call for help, but I couldn't move. When I looked at him, he suddenly jumped back in fear. "Ah!" He screamed like an animal. Then my entire body seemed to relax, and when I looked at my brother again, something stank like a wild animal. His eyes were wide open, drool hung from his mouth, and then he screamed. I looked at my mother and she was looking at him with tears in her eyes. She had already stopped the car, so I got her out and we ran to a nearby house for help. "Did the Yamame get you?" the old man said. He then shouted to his family to call a monk. That was as much as I remembered. I lost consciousness, and when I came back to, I was in the hospital. Apparently, I'd been passed out for 3 days. My mother called the doctor and I got permission to go outside. I was so scared of what happened to my little brother that I wasn't able to ask her anything at the time. But I couldn't stop thinking about it, so once we were outside, I asked her, how is Tsuyoshi?" Her smile suddenly disappeared. "Who? What? You're my only child." Huh? I thought she was joking, but she was serious. I quickly called my grandfather. "Grandpa, Mum's acting strange. She said Tsuyoshi doesn't exist." He then replied through sobs, "I should have stopped you that time. Keiko, Tsuyoshi." All I could do was stand there in silence. I was able to leave the hospital a month later, and I had to say goodbye to my mother at the time. I heard that both her and my brother were put in a mental institution. Why on earth did all of this happen? 3 years have passed and I still visit my mother 3 times a month. They won't let me see my brother. My grandfather took his own life, confusing matters even more. But I'm still alive. That's enough for me. A student with a rather weak stomach always makes sure to take care of business before school, but it turns out that the closed door he always sees on his way in and out may house a rather terrifying inhabitant. Find out why in Always. When I was in high school, I had a weak stomach, so I often left the house a little early before school to use the dirty public toilets on the way. These toilets were just a short distance from the station, a little off the path in some woods, if you could even call them that. And every time I went, the very first stall door was always closed. Of course, I knew that an actual person was in there. I could hear sneezing, coughing, and the pages of a newspaper being turned. But I didn't have too much time to worry about it. I had to do my business quickly so I wasn't late for school. It didn't strike me as odd at the time that every time I went there was always someone in that same spot at the same time. That was just how it was, I thought. I would leave the house early in the morning. My stomach would start to hurt on the train. I'd rush to the public toilets and then go to school. This went on for over a year, and then one day, when I was in the 2nd grade, I once again got a stomach ache and ran for the toilets. As usual, I ran past the closed stall and then finished my business. It was then that I heard a voice coming from that stall. "How nice. You always seem to be in good health." It sounded like another student, or at least someone young. I'd been using that toilet for over a year, and I'd never heard that person's voice before. But what on earth did "always" mean? "Ah, yeah, well," was all I could manage in response. But what he said next was even weirder. "My stomach has been messed up all this time, you know? For real. It just won't come out. I haven't left this place for a long time. Seriously. My stomach just isn't happy and nothing is coming out." I wanted to wash my hands, but I was getting awful chills. I decided to wash them at school instead and rushed out of there, my heart beating wildly. There was no way I could turn around and look back either. That word, always. How did he know that I was always there if he never left the stall? And what did he mean by, "I haven't left this place for a long time"? Did that mean he'd been in there for over a year? The more I thought about it, the less I understood. But after that day, no matter how much my stomach hurt, I just put up with it until I got to school or did my business at home and prepared myself for being late. I don't know if that person was actually human or not, but I've never experienced anything as creepy as that before in my life. Finally this week, a group of friends stay in a guest house while on a trip to the beach, but when one of them gets up to use the toilet late during the night, he encounters something truly bizarre and terrifying. Find out what in Midnight Toilet. This happened when I went on a trip to the beach with 3 of my university friends. We'd been good friends for a long time, so I was really looking forward to the trip. Our chatter in the car on the way there was even more fun than usual, and whenever we saw a sign or building that we didn't understand, we all laughed about it. So, yeah, we were pretty excited. When we arrived at the guest house, which was really old and shabby. Not even that was enough to bring our spirits down. It was just like, oh no, we've spent way too much on this place. An old lady who seemed to be the owner showed us around, but we didn't see any other guests or employees, so it probably wasn't guest season for a shabby old place like this. The wooden floorboards creaked loudly, and there were no toilets in the rooms. There was only a public toilet accessible from the hall. Not to mention it was a Japanese-style squat toilet. The naked light bulbs hanging from the roof were covered in dust, and I honestly wanted to tell them that they should clean the place better. But at any rate, our room wasn't too far from the toilet, and it was cleaner than I expected, as it should be. And we were mostly here to hang out at the beach, so our spirits still weren't dampened. We put our luggage in the room and then made our way straight to the beach to swim. We hung out there until sunset. Then we went out to eat because the guest house didn't come with meals attached. And then finally, we went back around 9 p.m. We had a few drinks and chatted a while, but we were tired from traveling and all our time at the beach, so around midnight, we finally hit the sack. We spread our bedding out on the ground at random and then went to sleep. Later that night, I'm not sure what time, I suddenly woke up. It didn't feel like I'd slept for that long, so maybe it was around 2 or 3 a.m. One of my friends was snoring loudly and they all seemed to be in a deep sleep. I realized I really needed to go to the toilet, so that was probably why I woke up. Well, I hadn't been there since we got back, so it made sense. Why do I have to use the toilet this late at night? I thought absent-mindedly. A ghost is gonna get me. I carefully stepped over my friends and left the room. I fumbled my way down the dark, creaky corridor. The light switch for the toilet was on the outside, and I stared at the naked bulb, wondering if it would turn on. I flicked it, and with a small audible click, it thankfully turned on. It wasn't very strong, but it was enough to do my business in. I pulled my pants down and squatted. It was so quiet that it hurt my ears. The only thing I could hear was my own breathing as I went to the toilet. Nothing was coming out. My feet hurt. That girl I saw earlier was cute. Various thoughts went through my head as I squatted in that toilet late at night, like a scene from a horror movie. I wanted to get back to the room as soon as possible. When I was almost done, I thought I heard something. Was I mishearing? But then I heard it again. The corridor was creaking. It seemed whoever was out there was coming this way. There were no rooms past the toilet, so this had to be their destination. There didn't seem to be any other guests there besides us, so that meant that one of the other guys must have woken up and needed to use the toilet too, right? I wasn't in the room and the light in the toilet was on, so they had to know that I was in there, I thought. But maybe one of them was about to wet their pants, or maybe they had a stomachache or something and they needed the toilet right away. As if to support this theory, the creaking in the corridor continued as it got closer. I checked to make sure the door was locked and then tried to finish my business quickly. Finally, whoever it was reached the other side of the door. If they knocked, it would be hard for me to return it, considering the position I was in. As such, I decided to call out first and let them know that I was in there and almost done. "Who is it? I'm in here. Sorry, I'll be done soon. Are you one of the employees?" There was no response, but there was a small click, and then the lights went out. Huh? What the hell? That's not funny, so quit it. It was too dark to even see my own hands, so I panicked. You're being ridiculous. This toilet is scary, man. Still, there was no response, but whoever was on the other side of the door seemed to be standing there and not moving. Damn it. Once I'm done in here, I'm gonna beat the crap out of whoever is out there, I thought. As I groped around for the toilet paper, I heard someone mumbling on the other side of the door. The voice was too small to hear what they were saying, so I couldn't tell which one of my friends it might be. As I wiped my backside, I thought that all of this was way too much for a prank. With how staged it felt, my anger subsided and I actually laughed instead. Groping around again, I flushed the toilet and stood up. I reached around for the lock and then hit it with my hand. Although it was hard to hear because of the flushing water, I could still hear whoever was on the other side of the door muttering something. "Hey, I'm coming out now." "Good job, you really got me. I'm opening the door now, so step back a bit." I gripped the doorknob. It wouldn't open. I couldn't understand what was going on. The doorknob wouldn't turn. There wasn't a lock on the outside of the door, so why? Thinking it might be broken, I gripped it with both hands and tried desperately to open it, but as I broke out in a sweat, I realized why it wouldn't. The person on the other side of the door was also gripping it tightly and keeping it from opening. "Ha ha, you got me. You win. Now let me out," I said as though this was all fun and games, although I doubt I was smiling at the time. Once the sound of the flushing water stopped, I was surrounded by nothing but darkness and that muttering voice, and I realized I was sweating even more. It was also clear that voice was getting louder. I still couldn't hear what exactly was being said, but where it sounded faint before I flushed the toilet, now it sounded like a regular voice right next to me. It was low, but I couldn't tell whether it was a man or a woman. When I properly heard that voice, I started to panic again. I mean, it was clear that it wasn't one of my friends. I'd never heard that voice before. And if that person out there wasn't one of my friends, then they had no reason to be doing this. Who was it? Why were they doing this? What on earth were they muttering about all this time? But then suddenly, the voice stopped. A terrible feeling washed over me, and I locked the door. The very next moment, the doorknob rattled. They couldn't open the door because I'd locked it. The doorknob rattled, and as it did, I began to suspect that whoever was on the other side wasn't human. The mumbling started again, this time louder than before. They even started banging on the door. Suddenly, I was convinced that whatever that person was saying, it wasn't normal, and it was terrifying. I also knew that I shouldn't listen to it. Honestly, it was like I knew that I shouldn't understand what they were saying. I had no proof for this, but strangely, it was like it was obvious. Like, it was as obvious as knowing that jumping from a tall place would be fatal. But knowing that didn't change anything. On the contrary, the voice kept getting louder and louder. If this continued, I'd hear what they were saying even if I didn't want to, and if it was Japanese, then I'd understand it as well. I didn't realize it, but I was crying. I screamed my friends' names. I screamed for help. I screamed for salvation. I just screamed. I also wanted to drown out the voice on the other side of the door. But it was strange. Such loud screams late at night should have woken my friends, or at least the staff in the guest house. Even as I screamed, the other voice continued getting louder and louder too. If I didn't keep screaming, then I'd hear what that voice was saying. And for some reason, I hated myself for knowing that the voice was saying something I shouldn't hear, something horrible. As I screamed, I worried that the lock alone wouldn't be enough to keep the door shut, so I grabbed the doorknob tightly as well. But I knew it was no use. That voice on the other side would no doubt keep getting louder. I cried and cried, wondering why this was happening to me and what was going to happen next. I put my fingers in my ears, covered the rest with the palm of my hands, and then cowered in the corner of the toilet with my back to the door. It was pitch black, so I didn't know if my face was right next to the toilet or not, but I was not in a position to care about how dirty it was. I no longer had the strength to scream, but if I didn't, I'd soon hear that loud voice even with my ears covered. I was in such a panic that I don't remember what I said, but it was probably something along the lines of, "Kami-sama, please save me." Looking back on it now, praying to the toilet Kami-sama reminds me of that song and makes me laugh, but at the time, it was anything but funny. Then, someone touched my head. Surprised, I looked up. Were they finally inside? No, they were still muttering on the other side of the door. No, not muttering, screaming. For a second, I almost understood what the voice was saying, and panicking, I screamed. I didn't hear a single word, but the pronunciation at least was Japanese. I didn't know what to do, but I was so tired by that point that I also no longer cared. Whatever happened once I understood what was being said didn't matter. I gave up. Do as you like. I took my hands off my ears. At that moment, something tightly gripped and pulled my hand in the darkness. "Huh?" I thought, and found myself pulled through the spot where the wall was supposed to be. And I could hear the voice on the other side of the door, but it was like it wasn't entering my head. My consciousness was being pulled in the direction of my hand. In the darkness, with no way to tell up from down, left from right, I was able to run anywhere while being pulled. Gradually, the terrifying voice got further away, and then finally, I could no longer hear it. Exhausted, I hit the ground, landing on my backside with a loud thud. I was more mentally exhausted than physically, though. At any rate, when it became clear that I was safe, I passed out. When I came back to, I was in the toilet. Somebody was banging on the door. I almost panicked again, but then I heard someone calling my name. "Hey, are you okay?" It was my friends. Plus, the toilet was bright. The light was on. As soon as I unlocked the door, it flung open. The worried faces of my 3 friends stood before me. "What the hell are you doing screaming so late at night? We thought a giant lizard attacked you or something," they said with a laugh, seeming relieved. But when I saw them, I was both half happy and half angry. "What the hell are you doing? I mean, all that really wasn't you guys?" I screamed. They looked at me strangely. "What do you mean?" "We heard you screaming from the toilet, so we got up to help. We just got here." "But it seemed you were in the toilet, but you weren't answering. You were kicking up such a fuss that we had to go and get some staff." I looked beyond them and saw the old lady who had showed us around standing a short distance away. She looked somewhat troubled. "Sir, did something happen?" she asked, looking worried. It wasn't like they were hiding something, but rather, she seemed upset that a bug or a lizard or something might have attacked because they didn't do a good enough job managing the place. "No, it's nothing. Sorry," I said, and then returned to our room with my friends. My head was a mess, and I had so many questions, but I'll leave it at that. That was everything that happened. When I remember that toilet, I can't help but wonder what was on the other side of that door and what pulled me through the darkness as well. I don't know anything about that area or the history of the guest house though. Well, not like I've looked into it either. To begin with, maybe I fell asleep in the toilet and had a nightmare. Maybe it really was my friends pulling a prank on me. But the feeling of someone pulling my hand and running was real. There were no floors, but the floor was the floor of the toilet. There's no way that could have been possible. And The certainty that something bad would happen if I heard what that voice was saying was also real. I still haven't thanked whoever saved me that time. I'll do it while I'm writing this here. I don't know if they'll see this or if it will reach them, but if it does, thank you very much. A massive thank you and shout out to this week's Kami tier members, Christina, Just Sawn, and S-Dash. It's thanks to your support, along with everyone else, that I'm able to keep doing this show, so thank you very much. Don't forget to check out Kowabana Volume 12, out on Amazon right now. And check out our newly revamped merchandise store at kowabana.store. And if you'd like to chat about this week's stories, come and join us in the Kowabana Discord. You can find that link in the description or on kowabana.net. You can also check out our Patreon at patreon.com/TaraADevlin for exclusive bonus stories and extras, or our YouTube channel at youtube.com/KowabanaJapan for all sorts of Japanese horror you won't find anywhere else. Thanks guys, stay safe, and I'll see you again next time for even more Kowabana, true Japanese scary stories from around the internet. Want even more scary stories? Head over to kowabana.net for new translations every week. You can also join our Patreon for exclusive stories you won't find anywhere else. Head over to kowabana.net now.